Hello and welcome to today's Level Up Your Chess video, where we look at applying the opposition as well as combining it with key squares. Well, if you haven't already, do check out my other video on the key squares where I explain that a pawn's key squares, where if we reach it with our king we will win, are always 3 ahead until it gets to the 5th rank where it becomes 6, including the 3 previous and gaining 3 more. With that in mind, here we have a position with white to play. And it's very tempting to play the move king d6. Of course, it reaches one of the aforementioned 3 key squares. And if black defended, white could then lose a move. And because white is to the side of the pawn and black has no such luck, attacking e5, then of course black will be forced to move. And the king on the 6th rank will win the game because this pawn is 2 squares from queening. And so even if it were white to play, they could just shift to the side and then the pawn pushes and they will squeeze the black king out. In this position, we can even lay out the red carpet very directly and win the game. However, king d6 here has a fatal flaw because black does have a way to manhandle this king out of the way, and it is e5. Of course, we'd love to take on e6 and be on the 6th rank, which we know will inevitably win. But here, we will have to take on e5 at some point. There's no other way to make progress, of course. This pawn is there to stay. And whether we dance around and wait, as long as black does not come to e7, the critical square, first, then after the inevitable capture, king e7 will win the opposition, and this is a theoretical draw where the pawn cannot reach forwards because our king is not able to reach the key squares. White has lost the opposition and simply will be barred to enter. And after e5, this is a theoretical draw. We need to be in front of the pawn, of course. With all of that being said, of course, e5 is a very good mechanism by black to compel white's king away from the key squares in red, and so black will then be able to win the opposition. As such, e5 by white is a critical move and the only one that actually retains the win, because this defends 2 squares here, forcing this king to have access eternally to f6 and d6, and as such, this king can never prevent white's king from attacking e6. Even though king e7 briefly stops king d6, after king c7, we will force our way in. And because this pawn is a helper and this pawn on e6 doesn't really defend relevant squares, black's king will be forced away. We will break through to the side of the pawn. Black, of course, still has no such luck. And when they defend, they only defend from 1 square on f7. We have 2 in blue. And as such, we will play king d7, lose a move, and then the next turn, we will win this. And because even here, if they win the opposition, we can just sidestep king to d8, and because it takes 2 moves, this will then force this king to move, and we squeeze out the black king. Let's look at that one more time. So black is threatening e5, which would displace this king from the key squares, and as such, e5 by white, preventing that, forces black's king to move. And although this briefly prevents us coming in, we can simply win the opposition for one thing, but also because our pawn in yellow defends some very useful squares, black's king is forced to move, and even with best play, black now can only defend from 1 square in yellow, and we have 2 squares in blue, and so we can lose a move, force the black king to move, and then have a theoretically won endgame where we do the squeeze. And that's how you can win with just 1 pawn using the opposition and key squares. Hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for more. Cheers.